in conversation today, and my compliments to you all. And uh, and Divya has been extremely kind also in in such a gracious introduction. Thank you so much for that. Without taking more time, let's move on to the discussion of the day. Today, we are trying to have a conversation on media entrepreneurship, or for that matter, innovation and entrepreneurship with special reference to media. And this is a very pertinent conversation. And alongside, I would like to share my screen with you all. Just, yeah. So, can everybody see the screen?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Right. So the conversation which we are going to have today is on media innovation and entrepreneurship. And that takes me to the two words, media and entrepreneurship. And as we try and figure out what all has been happening in media ecologies, media ecosystems, medias of the world, it's very important to understand how media has come around in India, especially in the last 15 years. And that is exactly what this conversation can start with, that media in India in the last 3 decades has changed goals. Initially, media was all about trying to achieve various kinds of development, social development, economic growth, as well as human development, and trying to, in that sense, accentuate the process of development in the country. We would have programming for social change, we would have content dedicated to population, to health, and so on and so forth. So a lot of that aspect of media was prominent, was underlined in the early years. And from there, with the new economic policy in 1991, which we adopted with the new economic reforms in 92, media became liberal, media became more globalized, and we had the free market run in which included, lesser tariffs, lesser interference by various forms of government, more transnational integration, and the business aspect of media, that how media can proliferate, how media can grow, how media can progress as a business entity, became one of the dominant shifts in the growth and expansion of media in India. And what we've seen in the last couple of decades is tremendous growth. What we've seen is explosion in that sense. What you can see on your screen is that by 2030, what we're estimating is about 12% increase in compound growth rate. That is about close to 3.5% sharp rise. That's an exponential rise in the space that is given to media in the country. That is the growth, escalating growth of media in the country we are witnessing at the moment. Not only are we witnessing high growth figures, the numeric value has gone up, but we're also, in that sense, seeing a shift in cultural adaptation. The kind of media content, the kind of media, disruption which we are at the moment experiencing is largely governed by the cultural adaptation we all have witnessed in the last 1 decade. And I'm not really configuring at the moment what pandemic has added or taken away from it. But the last 1 decade, in that sense, has been instrumental in creating adaptable cultural spaces for media consumers all across the world. Market dynamics have also been tremendous. We've seen shift. We've seen print moving to paperless gradually. Now, of course, it's radical. Post pandemic, the shift from paper to paperless is far more radical. We've seen web and television synergizing or coming together to create a platformic convergence. We've seen the growth of digital. There was a time before 2018 when the digital was close to 12% in the entire market media share. But what we see is a dynamic rise of digital, which is now close to 38% in some of the industries. And the latest media and entertainment figures from Wiki tell us that it is almost consistent as 27%, which is quite high in a country which is segregated, in a country which is extremely disparate. What we're also seeing in terms of media in India is a lot of media multitasking. That a lot of us, like for instance, at the moment, all of us are in this conversation, in this lecture, but I'm very sure that so many of you have your mobile phones in your hands and you're scrolling some other sites, maybe a news site, maybe you're checking out what's happening on the Asian Games front. Has India improved its tally from 102 to more? Have we added more medals? Or some of you maybe just, trying to understand what's happening on the news click front. So many journalists have been hauled up and you were trying to refresh your information and get more updates on it. Maybe some of you are just checking the Sunday brunch section, or for that matter, maybe some of you are, tuned into Spotify. So a lot of media multitasking has become the order of the day. In fact, media consumption, almost all of us have moved away from being a moderate media consumer or a light media consumer to a heavy media consumer. In that sense, George Gerbner, I'm reminded of George Gerbner, who spoke about light and heavy uses in the context of television. But what's happening with screen time, what's happening with the second screen, that is social media, it's far more exemplified now. And besides that, what we also see in terms of media in India is that media is no longer just an economic transaction, a lot of social transaction. Social enablement, process of social monetization, process of socialization, process of social desirability, bias creation. So a lot of social transaction spaces, and along with social commerce has also been built in with the kind of expansionist surge we've seen in media growth and dynamics in India, or media businesses in the country. And that brings us to this concept, this framework, which has acquired newer meaning, which has now become extremely important in our new age conversations, and that is media entrepreneurship. Let me admit, not too long ago, there was a lot of confusion with regards to what exactly is media entrepreneurship, and that is why, to ease out this confusion, I started off with media in India. How dynamics, how cultural adaptation, how social transaction, how media multitasking defines contemporary media. So that aside, now we move on to how media entrepreneurship becomes, a concept in itself, a holistic, integrative concept. And like I told you, there has been a lot of confusion. In fact, many people say, is it a conundrum? Is media entrepreneurship an area which is very difficult to define? Well, it took some time for media entrepreneurship to have a structural definition. But as we grew, understood it, and evolved, we had clarity with regards to what exactly are we talking about. So when we talk about media entrepreneurship, what are the fundamentals of media entrepreneurship is that we are trying to create something, that there is newness of it, that we're trying to come up with something, and that there is a creation and ownership of a small enterprise, that there is a creation and just give me there is a creation and ownership of a small enterprise or an organization which might come up with any activity. That could be an activity of developing news content, that could be, coming up with an application, a gaming application, that could be coming up with an AI generated bot, a robo which helps you in customer care, a robo which helps you in understanding some phenomena. Like for instance, at the time of COVID, lot of social bots were created to help people understand the disease, the control of the disease, the contravention of the disease, as well as the remedial practices associated with it. So any activity, it is creation and ownership of an enterprise which engages in any activity in the mediated marketplace. As in, you have to be innovative. At the end of the day, it has to be a mediated marketplace. And what do you mean by mediated marketplace? That marketplace is about either news or non-news content like films, gaming, video, sound objects, products related to advertising and public relations. So this entire media is not just about news. It's about news, non-news, persuasive, and entertainment content. So any such activity which is created through innovation then comes under the territory of media entrepreneurship. I hope that at least fixes the spotlight into the area or the territory which we are trying to study together. Now, that raises four strategic questions: that if media entrepreneurship is about an innovative idea, if media entrepreneurship is about creation of something, creation of an enterprise which may be small in nature and which largely deals with coming out with an output driven media product, then what are those questions which we need to grapple with? How would I start an enterprise? So that generally brings me to the four strategic questions which all of us need to engage with while dealing with media entrepreneurship and innovations. Number one is the competitive landscape. How is the media landscape changing? Like, for instance, when we started out, we talked about the Indian media dynamics are changing. There is a shift of power balance. Earlier, the power balance in terms of media was in the hands of traditional media. So your print and television largely dictated the share of the market in terms of media dynamics in the country. But what's happening is now there's an increasing share of the footprint of digital market. There is a change in consumer behavior. Your media consumer is changing. Today, what we are consuming in terms of media applications, in terms of OTT platforms, the type of content, the type of applications has also changed. So, what is the new competition? For example, earlier, whenever we spoke about news, we would audiovisual news, we would rather talk about electronic news channels like the NDTV or the Times Now or the CNN IBN and so on and so forth. Today, when we negotiate the media landscape, most of our conversations also include the Quint. We also include the Wire, the News Laundry, and also the YouTube mode of revenue creation in news value. And that is, you have the Ramesh Kumar official, you have Avisar also online, and many, many other, content creators which are in the social media scape. So, how is the new media scape changing is the fundamental question which you have to address. And then, of course, what are the new sources of value? At the end of the day, an enterprise or whatever product you create in the media enterprise, that may be content, that may be service, that may be a tangible product or an application, whatever you may create, at the end of the day, it is for a target audience. It is for audiences, it is for people, it is for consumers. So that it is very important to assess the needs of the consumer. What needs can be met? What problems can be solved? And what desires can be fulfilled? So here you can see that the business side of entrepreneurship comes into practice. At the end of the day, as an economist, we all know that we are talking about needs, demands, and desires. So these three principal elements of enterprise becomes integrated with Mediascape to create a media entrepreneurship. Besides these two, third strategic question deals with: are there some new capabilities which are required in order to become a successful media entrepreneur? Or whatever capabilities I have at the moment are enough for me to start an enterprise and to run from an existing setup and to run it successfully? Now, this is a difficult question, but a simple answer would be that you require new work based competencies for sure. What you need at the moment is also, like, for instance, I come from a generation in which when I started to work in the creative departments, the requirement was for a drawing software like a Corel Draw or an Adobe Illustrator in order to create a print or a 2D a digital advertisement, or for that matter, at best, two-dimensional softwares like, Adobe Photoshop or Adobe PageMaker. So the creative suite of Adobe used to be of help to us. But today, it's all about gaining new work-based competencies. If I want to start a new advertising digital studio as a media entrepreneur, what I need today is greater command over Canva. My understanding of Java has to be spot on, because I need to create rich media memes, rich media text advertisements, lot of sponsored posts which are three-dimensional in nature. Then I need to also integrate lot of infographics, and hence my understanding of other softwares like Adobe Flash or special effects also come into picture. So you require new distinctive competencies. That is something which is quite likely if you're looking to explore media entrepreneurship. And of course, last but not the least, are the new business models. And that's exactly what most of the conversations have been in the last quarter when we talk about media innovation and entrepreneurship in the country. How are media organizations structured today? How are they capturing value? It's all about creating value for people. If it's value, if it adds value to public life, to consumers life, the enterprise is likely to go well. Otherwise the enterprise might just struggle and will be difficult to sustain for itself. So how are these media organizations structured? We are going to deal with it as we progress in this session. Like I was telling you, the environment history, that's the first thing. The media ecosystems or media ecologies have been disrupted, especially in the context of India, a country with diverse geographical identities, a country with very complex and variegated demographic identities, along with, psychographic identities, which are equally, in that sense, convoluted. So what we've seen in the post-pandemic times is that there is a disruption for sure, and that disruption may have started with the Digital India initiative, started by the government of India, but largely it's been pushed through by this tremendous growth in the e-commerce sector. And I'm not just talking about the electronic commerce in terms of fintech, or the e-wallets, like Amazon and Flipkart. I'm also talking about the growth of social commerce sector enterprise, which has really grown in the last 3 to 4 years. And that, along with the changing consumer behavior across product categories, across sectors, including the sunrise sectors, have also happened. What we see on screen is some data from Invest India. Invest India is, of course, the government portal, and that keeps on giving you the updated figures. At the moment, India is sitting very pretty. India is very pretty, sitting pretty in terms of being the second largest market by app downloads. So we are a country of applications, and that is why I said we are a country which is almost a hotbed for possibilities or opportunities of media entrepreneurship, because we are a country wherein people love applications of various kinds: specialized applications, generic applications, category-based applications, genre-based applications, type-based applications. You name it, we have it. Besides that, it is also a country where the footprint of social media users is tremendously high. In fact, in absolute terms, we are second largest in the world, and also the second largest market in terms of audiovisual streaming apps, and the largest market in terms of video streaming applications. So we are great streamers. We like to consume a lot of media content. So that's very, very healthy for an entrepreneurship. It gives me so much hope if I want to start an enterprise, because people are already, inclined towards consuming media, and that enables me to start a product or an idea or a service or a content or whatever I may want to, in that sense, produce and distribute for profit or non-profit purposes. So this is one disruption which happened, that how consumer behavior has totally taken a U-turn. Not just consumer behavior, what we are also seeing is the rise of the independent entrepreneur. There is a larger thrust on self-reliance. When a country grows, trying to touch an economic growth of around double figures, it is often struggling to create more jobs for itself. The larger enterprises, the public sector units are not able to provide jobs to all, and hence the mantra becomes, let's go in for entrepreneurship. Let's try to create self-reliance. And when the mode of being becomes self-reliance, the internet, the rise of the internet and the industrial revolution 4.0, along with the rise of the independent entrepreneur based on the dictum of self-reliance, becomes a huge marker, a huge visible marker of media, of the rise of media entrepreneurship in any country. What we're seeing is rise of Web 2.0. Web 2.0 is about creating network of communities. Web 1.0 was about internet connectivity, right? Reaching everybody beyond, at the global level, beyond geographical locations, cutting across borders. But Web 2.0 is creating networks of societies, creating communities online. So all of that, along with reduction of entry barriers, what's happened? Respective governments across the world have relaxed the entry barriers. Now, different players, market players, different media players, telecom houses, they can easily enter the sectoral markets, the transnational markets with far more ease. There's a liberal tax regime, and of course, there's a lot of incentivization, which I'm going to talk about late in the later half of this particular session. And what we're also seeing is there is a decline in production cost. that things are getting earlier, the cameras, the broadcast equipment. If you wanted to create audiovisual content, you would not be able to do it, and that is why mainstream media would do whatever they want to do, because you do not have that kind of funds. So but the production cost of late, of the mechanics involved, of the equipment involved, has come down. So that's become far more affordable, and that disruption is creating space for entrepreneurial exercises. What also happened is, that you have now this idea of distance working. What the pandemic has introduced us to is, being confined to home. We were all working from home, right? So in many ways, this idea has been lapped up by media entrepreneurs to now hire people, to have staffers, to have its own unique human resource models in which people can work from a distance, and yet the collaborations, and yet the work is quite facilitative, and the work is in that sense extremely productive. So this particular possibility of not being there in physical space and yet, working together as a team, has also been explored, and that's worked wonders for video entrepreneurship and any kind of innovations we're trying to look for. A direct contact with the consumers too is something which is a very fetching argument. It is very attractive to anybody who wants to start up their own studio or start up a news portal. It becomes extremely fertile, a ground to have a direct dialogue, a dialogical loop, to have instant feedback. It's almost the return of interpersonal communication in the interactive spaces. And that is exactly what I was trying to tell you, that all of these aspects which I have just pointed out, they've revolutionized the way companies are doing their businesses, and that has also led to creation of new firms and new opportunities. And within that firms, you have the idea of the intrapreneurs and the entrepreneurs. Now the intrapreneurs are people who are using the same system. Let's say I am working in Indraprastha University, and here I take up an independent project to start up, let's say, a new application. Let's say games for change. I make games for development communication, so I start working on a digital game. So now that particular innovative business, which is my model, would be being an intrapreneur. I am part of a particular system, part of an organization, yes, yet I diversify or subset into a new idea and I take it up as an independent project. That could be one model. But what has proliferated, what has really been accepted more, is the idea of entrepreneurs. And that is that you start a new enterprise, that you move away from the parent firm, parent organization, and then you actually start up a new enterprise, which has which of course is based on a new idea, and which is dealing with some mediated product or the other. Now because there is a lesser need for resources, now is the time when you're using resources more eclectically, more prudently, more effectively. Media entrepreneurs are finding, in this country at least, a lot of scope and prospects. And that is quite visible in the way all of us are structuring our courses in university curricula as well. With the new education policy being adopted everywhere with a lot of alacrity, what we are seeing is a lot of courses on media entrepreneurship and media innovation. And most of those courses are lapped up. They are hot, they're selling like hotcakes, and they're almost courses wherein you have very high enrollment, even on, for that matter, on SWAM portals. So this was setting up the premise of how we, how the space or the factors or the determinants which led to rise of media entrepreneurship as this favored area, as an area which is gaining huge impetus and popularity in the country. We moved to the process. Like I was telling you, there was a lot of confusion in the beginning with regards to what exactly is media entrepreneurship. One thing which defines it is that it is an idea, it is an innovation, and it entails process of design thinking. And if we want to really explain it a little more, I would rather use the Stanford's design thinking model, which talks about that in terms of media enterprise, or when we're trying to create a media entrepreneurship, the three fundamental overlapping circles we have are the use of technology, how feasible it is to use innovative technologies, not so expensive technologies, to create a new product or a service or an idea, how Facilitative is the environment, the macro environment around us to create the business. When I say that, I mean the legal framework. I also mean the government policies. I mean how much capital do you have as a person? Because when we start the media entrepreneurship, everybody knows it all starts. The first set of money comes from family, from your own savings, and from friends. Later, of course, every business takes off if it does, and then you have profitability of the enterprise, sustainability of the enterprise, and so on and so forth. But viability is a very important prospect which we need to really dig into before we set up an enterprise. And another very important aspect of this design thinking is human value. So whatever enterprise we are conceptualizing is about human values. Is there a desirability? Is there a usability of this idea? I want to start a content website on, let's say, mm, lost villages, villages which are lost in the past, in the histories, villages, the stories of the villages which are untold. So is there a usability or desirability of such kind of content, or people are interested in, let's say, a sport driven content website, a cricket driven content website? So it is very important for me to do that analysis alongside a consumer profiling and segmentation analysis, that when three things come together, human value, desirability, and usability, then
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. Your screen is frozen, ma'am.
I believe, am I there?
Ma'am, your screen is not visible. For some time it was frozen.
From where? Could you see this one? Now is it visible?
Uh, no, ma'am, PPT is not visible. Can you once close it
I,
and again
I
share it, reshare it?
reshare. Yeah, reshare. Let me try that. Can you see it now?
No, ma'am, not yet.
I can. It's showing that it's there. Are you sure you're not able to see it? It's
Yeah,
showing.
it's not visible. Is it visible to others?
No, ma'am,
No,
it is
ma'am.
not.
No, ma'am.
Possible.
Just a minute. Try one more time. Now is it visible?
No,
No,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Seems I'll have to rejoin. Probably then only.
Ha, ma'am. Yeah, can you
Yeah.
please do that, ma'am? Yeah, now you're visible.
Let me try to share the screen one more time. Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess you were not able to pick up on this slide. Is that so?
No, ma'am. The next one.
The next one.
This one, yes.
Yeah, so we've had some conversation on this. I hope I was audible. Was I?
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am. You were talking about human values.
Yeah, so
You were
Ma'am, you
almost
exactly.
spoke
finishing it.
about content on lost villages, and then your screen froze, ma'am.
All right. So like I was telling you that, at the end of the day, media entrepreneurship or coming up with a design innovation or an idea is a process. And this process is based on convergence, finding a convergence between technology, between business and human values. All three of them, if they're overlapping spaces, these overlapping spaces are going to tell us what is that design idea which is going to work and on which we can set up our enterprise. And that gives us an opportunity to look at entrepreneurship and innovation, and that is how your talk is structured. The theme of your talk is about, trying to understand or contextualize both entrepreneurship and innovation. And the fundamental question that comes to our mind is, are both of these two sides of the same coin? Well, yes and no. Like, for instance, when we talk about an innovation, we're trying to look at ideas in the context of media entrepreneurs. We're trying to look at ideas that identify with small entrepreneurships that have a possibility of being converted into small enterprises, and that they require low number of people, and that the capital requirements, the monetary requirement or the funding requirement is also low. But what we also must recognize that, when we're talking about innovation, it is not always about eureka. It's not always coming up with a new idea which nobody's thought about ever before. It can be also imitative innovation, like for instance a particular model which has been tested. Let's say, like for instance in India we are talking about coming up with these mobile, make your own news through mobile phones. And we have lot of such platforms today, CGNet, Swara, which are media entrepreneurial exercises in India. But this is not something which is new to India. In various parts of South America, in Mexico, in Colombia, in some parts of East Asia like Korea, we've had, such examples wherein make my own news through mobile phones, that you use mobile technology to create your own content, and from there onwards you're disseminating it to a smaller population of a community or a society or a state. This model has existed in development societies before. So imitative innovation, that is, using a similar context, borrowing from another stream or discipline, and contextualizing or adapting it according to your own needs, is also innovation. Besides that, what we also see is, trying an attempt to redefine media entrepreneurship in the digital era. For the longest time, ever since the conversation picked up from 2006 onwards, and by 2008 you had the first set of definitions being put out, you were talking about media entrepreneurship as a traditional publishing. Publishing is something which is identifiable with media entrepreneurship. That was the easiest thing to do. You start off with a publishing portal, you start off with a publishing platform. So traditional publishing, traditional electronic media, traditional motion picture, video games, recorded music, or a digital design studio, digital advertising, or a booking agency is something which we recognized as media entrepreneurship for the longest time. And then later we crystallized them, all of these together, these advertising agencies, these publishing houses, these electronic media output firms, we put them together as industries that produce and sell information and entertainment. So we were looking at news and non-news content in terms of goods, services, ideas, data, and so on and so forth. But in more recent times, digital footprint has really expanded in the country. We're trying to understand media entrepreneurship in the internet-based context. And there, it goes beyond content production. So whatever we were discussing for a decade was about content creation, content production and distribution. So what has happened, what has changed in the last 2 3 years is that we're talking not just about content production, we're talking about platform provision. Platforms have become very, very important. Where are we going to put out that content? How are we going to monetize that particular content? What are the business models and the inventions within business models? And of course, let's not forget the importance of data. All kinds of real time data is being generated at the drop of a second. We are all internet mediated at the moment. This is an online FDP. So a lot of real time analytics is happening. How many people have, clicked? How many people have joined? How many people have been part of conversation, commented? So all kinds of analytics becomes an important aspect of media entrepreneurship in the internet based context today. So today when we look at entrepreneurship and innovation, we are juxtaposing both kinds of new ideas as well as imitative ideas which are being replicated from one place to another, one market to another, one discipline to another, in the context of digital journalistic ventures as well as digital non-news ventures, to contextualize the media entrepreneurship. Moving to the next important aspect, like I've been saying, there's a lot of gung-ho, lot of upbeatness about, media entrepreneurs, a lot of euphoria and happiness. Almost everybody's talking about it in their curriculum, in their skill development courses. All trainings and workshops are around them. Even your online training program had a special session on it. So what is the euphoria all about? Why are we so keen on it, so enthusiastic about it? But of course, one fundamental reason is it starts something new. It leads to foundation of something, a new venture, a new enterprise. But besides that, what is more important is the opportunity. It's creating a lot of opportunities in terms of trying to introduce a new product in the market, a new good or a service. And the way it's organizing markets, what's interesting at the moment is the way target audiences are being organized. The dynamics are changing. Earlier we were looking at target audiences in terms of areas. These are people who live in Delhi, in Southwest Delhi, so they have to be targeted in a given way. These are people who live in the 7 hill states of Northeast, so they're targeted in a given way. Then there are people who are in the Hindi heartland, the central belt of India, so they're targeted in a given way, and the markets were structured like that. No longer. With digitization, with monetization, with networks coming in and everybody becoming integrated, there are newer ways of organizing the market, and the media entrepreneurship is, in that sense, almost match made in heaven for that. And also, it is the process and the raw materials. Both raw materials, what entails, what are the elements of a media entrepreneurship are the raw materials. Raw materials can be talents, can be skills, can be people. So all of that, how they're laid out, how that process, whether it is linear or circular or reciprocal in nature, how that process pans out through efforts. Now, these are new kinds of efforts. How you create new relationships between old raw materials, between the same set of people, the same set of resources, between the existing paradigms to create something new. So this opportunity development intensifies the urge towards media entrepreneurship in a country like ours, especially in this part of Southeast Asia. Of course, it leads to economic growth and job creation. Of course, it disrupts the pockets of inefficiency in a system. There's been a systematic malaise. Everybody's been talking about how mainstream news media has become, in that sense, not so effective in trying to provide variegated, complex, critical news to the world, or to Indian population as well. That it's been, in that sense, lopsided in its coverage. And that is where media enterprises, the journopreneurs, the digital media enterprises, which have really flourished and thrived in the last 2 years, they have captivated the space. They've captivated the attention, and they are, in that sense, filling the gaps. They're providing you stories from Manipur. They're providing you stories from Malda. They're providing you stories from the smaller regions. People are telling their own stories in their short news portals. So regions, identities, gender and sexuality, all that was not visible, that was absent from the mainstream, is finding its space, its context, its content, its distribution in these media enterprises that we have slowly come up with in the country. And of course, we've talked about how this particular enterprise also creates. There is some problem with my screen. Is everybody able to see me?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Yes.
Right. I don't know what's happening today. Yeah. So in that sense, what is also important to understand is that when we are talking about entrepreneurship in the context of media, we are not necessarily only talking about for-profit organization. While the word entrepreneurship tends to lean towards trying to optimize profit, trying to maximize the use of resources in order to create opportunities of profit, agreed. But in the context of media entrepreneurship, we have to broaden this conversation because it includes broad categories of media, not just one kind of media. There is for-profit media, there is not-for-profit media. You can start off with, like for instance, Femworld. You can start off with there is a portal we all know which publishes content that is blogs, essays, autobiographicals, short stories about women, right? So you can start off with, various kinds of organizations or entrepreneurial exercises for a good cause, for a greater common good. That greater common good could be gender and climate change. That greater common could be gender equality. That greater common good could be, quality education to people who do not have access in the country, right? That content could be the greater common good of, not for profit organizations could also be about trying to build a society which believes in swachhata or sanitation, and also acknowledges that for sustainable development, scarcity of water needs to be managed. So when we are talking about media enterprises, we have this opportunity to not only have business entrepreneurship, we also have the opportunity to lean towards public policy which facilitates social entrepreneurship, right? So mediated spaces in that sense are richer spaces than any other entrepreneurial world. We can go in for profit, we can go in for non-profit, and we can go in for completely social organizations or cause-based or advocacy organizations, as in how we think fit in terms of our idea, in terms of our process. So that's exactly what is on display at the moment for you. That while we have business entrepreneurship, the models, of course, the examples, of course, are right in front of you. Examples like Google, extremely successful. Then you have Facebook, please correct the spellings. Yeah. So you have Facebook. Now, both of them, one is a social networking site, another is a search engine. Both of them are business models. These are business entrepreneurship. These are media entrepreneurships, which are for profit, right? So on the other hand, you have social entrepreneurships like People Archive of Rural, rural population in India. Now, People's Archive of Rural India is a social media entrepreneurship, not social media, but social, media entrepreneurship started by P. Sainath, one of the rural editors of Hindu at one point in time. Now, his online journal chronicles the journeys of people who live in rural India, and within that space tries to create, functional understanding of information, communication, technology enablement, empowerment, dissemination of information, role of media, and so on and so forth. So you have all kinds of, essentials which are required, like I've been trying to recreate. You can start a new enterprise or you can rework a existing one. You can go in for business entrepreneurship or you can go in for a social entrepreneurship as well. Coming to the India story now. When we're talking about the India story, what thrills me is, what excites me so much is the kind of space we are living in. The kind of space we are living in is a tremendously rich, explosive, exponentially rising mediatized space in the country. If you go by the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India report 2022, just the numbers will boggle you. The sheer volume of media which we see in this country is fascinating. On one side, you have a meteoric rise of television channels despite everything, and more so because of the regionalization of media, and also because every television channel has a digital, entity or a digital vertical to support it. It is now close to 1,000 television channels in the country with 386 private FM broadcast stations, more than 1 lakh or close to 1,50,000 publications. And we're talking about specialized publications, we're talking about general interest magazine publications, we're talking about mystical publications, we're talking about, publications which are dedicated to a particular genre like science publications. So all of that put together makes a very bright and healthy picture. And of course, on your screen, towards the right, you have this a very important figure of 40 digital content platforms with extremely high number of digital news platforms. So I have been talking about how media entrepreneurship gives you hope, gives you opportunities to succeed, opportunities to innovate, and all of that is now being validated by the report and the numbers you see. There has been a meteoric rise, and that in many ways, tells us the Indian media entrepreneurship story. Indian media entrepreneurship story, if you have to sum up the Indian media entrepreneurship story in the last 5 years, I would say Indian media goes digital. That sums up, because digital media in India, it came up at the turn of the millennium in the early 2000s. It came up with online publishing. Largely, it was an online publishing industry with online publishing platforms, trying to enter the market. Most of them were from various other places like France. They were publishing platforms from Germany, United States, and Canada, which created some kind of space for themselves in the country. But what's happened in the last 6-7 years is a radical shift. What we're seeing is an expansionary curve, which it's a serious proportion to measure today. Because if you look at the numbers, what we have at the moment, these of course come from one of the most credible sites in terms of digital media reportage, Hootsuite. And we see that pre-COVID digital media coverage shows us that there were about 560 million internet users in the country in 2019, and in 2022 you have around 47%, half the population is using internet, either using it for an hour once a day, or heavy users like 4 to 5 hours a day, whichever the case may be. But everybody today has a digital identity, is into digital access, and is digitized in that particular sense. Besides that, we also look at the figures of how mobile social media users have come up. Mobile in that sense, there's a demographic dividend. We are a country of many, we are a country of high population density, and how that benefits us is in the form of demographic dividend. That, per person data cost, per person telecom handset cost is very less as compared to people in Western Europe. So now that a smartphone is available for about 3,000 to 4,000 rupees, and people, at least in a family, one smartphone is making waves, or everybody owns a smartphone. In that sense, we've seen there is a rise, a substantial rise in the active social media users as well, along with rise in the mobile social media users, which have gone up from 21% to close to 34% in the last 3 to 4 years. Now, this is something which is now setting the stage for opportunities for innovation, opportunities for incubation of ideas, opportunities for risk taking, opportunities for moving away from just brick and mortar. One way of media entrepreneurship is that, I buy a space somewhere and I start a digital advertising agency. Oh, sorry, an advertising agency. Another could be that I virtualize it. I create an online model, a virtual advertising agency, and it does not have the brick and mortar kind of a status. It is a click and mortar kind of an enterprise which I've entered. So that too is something which is happening more, in fact, thick and fast today. In terms of news media, because most of you identify media entrepreneurship with news, and that is why a lot of examples are coming from news today. Because what's happened is, of course, there is a movement away from legacy media, and I've been talking about the reasons why mainstream media is going in a certain way. Mainstream media is becoming extremely homogeneous, and that led to a rise of the digital news ecology in the country in the form of a consortium called as DigiPub. Now, DigiPub is a news foundation, which is in many ways, a convergence, a space wherein many media enterprises, journalistic enterprises, news enterprises like the Quint, the News Laundry, the Wire, the Boom, Alt News, HW English, Scroll, and the News Minute right? And of course, there are 11 of them in that sense, but these are the more prominent ones which are up there on your screen. So all of them, right, they are media enterprises in themselves. Of course, they have different models. They have different revenue models. They have different business models. They have different editorial policies. They have different mission and vision statements, which is all true. But at the end of the day, all of them are media enterprises. Uh, and all of that has gone up. All of these possibilities in media entrepreneurship is there, because what we see is like what I was talking about, that more than 70% of our population is accesses news through smartphones. Now this is something which is significant, right? That we are accessing news, whether we are scrolling through it, we are jumping on it, we are just in that sense it's just pass along, whichever way we are consuming news. And that is heartening for the digital news ecology, which has led to these journalpreneurs in the country. We have a lot of news aggregator platforms which are performing very well, including Google News and Daily Hunt. We also have legacy media platforms. Legacy media platforms are like ndtv.com, aajtak.com.in. So all of these legacy media platforms, they are facing stiff competition from vibrant digital born brands like The Wire, The News Laundry. These are digital born brands because they are pursuing independent journalism. They are not dependent on government advertising revenue, or they're not even dependent on the ad driven revenue model, which has been the prescriptive model of legacy media or the mainstream media for the longest time we know in India. Now, as far as sources of revenue are concerned, what we're talking about is one could be the non-profit revenue model, that we are not really here to make money, that whatever we earn from this particular website, from this particular platform, pays the salaries, and rest of it goes in form of grants, fundraisers and donations. And because we are not taking any advertisements, so that is also there. There is a non-profit revenue model which is there. Some of these digital born brands like News Laundry are driven by completely by subscriptions and donations. They do not take any advertisements, and they are not into all those video streaming applications and all those collaborations, which is another way of looking at media entrepreneurship. But they're completely driven by subscription money, which comes from when the consumer subscribes to that particular platform, and the donations they receive from various organizations from India and abroad. So this is something which I wanted to bring home to you. And I also want to underline this facet that media entrepreneurship should not be reduced to genrepreneurs. It's not just about news entrepreneurship, it is about non-news entrepreneurship as well, which is done extremely well in the country. And two such examples are there on your screen. If you can see those examples, one of them is, of course, has really picked up, that is Poxo. These Popsco is an online platform. This is for women where they can watch, they can read, and they can shop. So this is a content platform where there's a lot of content available about women, for the women. But it is also a very interesting content website which creates a convergent environment for advertising, and a lot of commerce opportunity, e-transaction opportunities are available in case you want to start a private label brand. It is available in 6 different languages. So that's exactly what I was trying to tell you, that media entrepreneurship in the country may have begun with English based entities, English based businesses, but over a period of time we've understood how localization, how regionalization, how linguistic diversity in the country can be optimally utilized or optimally gained in our media entrepreneurship searches. So what we see with Popso is in that sense available in English, Tamil, Telugu, Bangladesh, Hindi, and Marathi, and it has close to 39 million visitors per month, which is spending more than 3 million hours. Not just this particular site, we also have another blogging platform which is doing extremely well, which is Wittyfeeder. The name itself tells you it is a content site again, which it's the largest articles and the listicle site, which brings to you humor, infotainment, entertainment, and the idea of reading, which is a lot of fun. This was started in 2014 by Vaishnav and Single, and ever since, they have been considerably growing as an enterprise, and by the time they were into their fifth year, that is 2019, you could see them blooming as an enterprise, and it's a serious startup which is now being, it's one of the best known 6 startups in the country for the longest time now. Such is the profitability of this particular model. Now, if you look at this particular infographic, now this is the infographic which in many ways sums up the situation of media entrepreneurship, the discourses around it, the context, the content, and the subtext which this particular premise of media entrepreneurship entails. If you look at the concentric circles right in the middle, media entrepreneurship is that particular space which is full of opportunity, innovation. It requires understanding and control. It requires either ownership or control of resources. It is a process. At the end of the day, it needs to create value. It because it's media entrepreneurship and not some edu tech or any, it's not Bazi.com or it's not Beju's. So it required it, whatever offering, whatever product, whatever outcome you are trying to create has to have a media intent to it. So it's a media offering you're trying to create. It has a certain kind of market dynamics. Organizational forms are important, and benefits are the primary concern. So if you look at various boxes in which different forms have been explained, you will understand that various kinds of consumers are, in the case of media entrepreneurship, it's your consumer is not just the consumer, the final media consumer or the target user who you are trying to reach. You're also trying to target your product to the advertiser. But for, let's say, news laundry, which is subscription driven, it is not the advertising driven entrepreneurship. There are many other sites like Wittyfield or Popso, which in that sense is trying to attract the advertisers. So the consumer is not just the final end user. The consumer is also the advertiser. And of course, the data aggregators, the people who are constantly in the demand of data. And that is why a lot of conversation, I'm sure, in this online FDP is also going to happen on data privacy and who's stealing my data, who's doing what with my data. But one of the realities is that there are a lot of data demanders. There are a lot of firms which are constantly looking for, so what are the numbers, right? In that sense, your customer is also the data demander or the data aggregator. And of course, there are other B2B, there are traders, vendors, industrial consumers, which are part of this consumer typologies, which you need to factor in when you are talking about media entrepreneurship. Benefit, when you try to deconstruct the word benefit in terms of media entrepreneurship, it entails not just the monetary benefit. And that is why I said it's not just profit, it is also non-profit. It's the kind of opportunities to see the attention value it creates. We're living in the attention economy. So it is about money, it is about attention, it is also about the energy which you are able to create in order to create a sustainable video enterprise. Organizational form could be one single individual can start an enterprise. You create a new venture, which we've been talking about. Ideally, the context is to create a new venture. It could be a corporate with a structured policy and the organizational structure, or it could be entrepreneurship in terms of using limited resources to form a small organization and then to optimally use these resources by skilling, upskilling, or reskilling people, and then talents and resources are mixed and matched to create a newer structure. You have various kinds of market needs as well, and that includes the niche, that is very targeted specific market, or the undifferentiated market as well. So value propositions and ideas too have been looked at. So if you look at media entrepreneurship, this gives you the entire picture of media entrepreneurship. And like I said in the beginning, that when we move towards the end of this particular talk, we'll talk about the business models as well. Especially business models become very, very important, especially in the time of internet driven media entrepreneurship. How do we make money, as in how is revenue made by various enterprises, by these new startups, these websites, Bazumo, BuzzFeed, for that matter, Exchange for Media. One of the biggest media entrepreneurship which comes to my mind, which is non-news, is Exchange for Media. So in that sense, how are they making money? People like News Laundry, like I told you, they are making money which are on the basis of subscription. They expect, they pledge, they request, They reach out to the consumers to subscribe to their channel, their platform, and then from there onwards, they make their money. Or sell of the copy, that is, they sell that particular content. That content can be visual, that content could be audio like Spotify. They sell that particular copy or the content, and then they directly, this is direct to consumer, and they directly make money from the consumer. Or pay per click, that is another one. Pay per view, these are two digital advertising revenue models which are extremely common. Or you are getting money from the advertiser or the publisher, right? So you are allowing somebody to keep their video streaming ads, to keep their tickers and scrolls or their banners or their rich media unit state advertisements as part of your enterprise, and from there onwards you are getting money from there. And of course, I've been trying to tell you that a lot of revenue is these days also coming from the sale of the user data. We can always talk about the ethics of the sale of the user data, but this is a reality in terms of how businesses are happening in today's milieu. Before we conclude this particular conversation on media entrepreneurship, it also becomes important to look at what is the environment around us. See, no business, no enterprise can succeed if you do not have support from entities which are extremely powerful or bodies which make the decision. In our case, it's very important that we try and figure out, is the government favorable towards creating media entrepreneurship in the country? That's a question we need to fix a spotlight on. Another thing we need to understand is that just in case we believe that the government is extremely supportive and is trying to incentivize media entrepreneurship in the country, what are the details? What are they exactly doing? Can you see that on the screen, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So up on the screen, we can see that the government is very, very serious about trying to ensure that self-reliance becomes a fundamental principle of, employability in the country. And looking at that, they have started numerous initiatives from Skill India to Digital India to Make in India to, for that matter, they've also the Startup India campaign. So what government does when it comes to, let's say, I want to start an enterprise, so government has three facet involvement in that. One is handholding, that they understand that I might have a dream to start a digital design studio, or you may want to start a photo studio, but at the end of the day, we do not understand what are the legalities. How am I going to register my firm? What all is entailed in terms of ensuring that my firm is not, involved in any kinds of duplication, plagiaristic, or any kind of violation of copyright. So IPR is very important. So besides the legal support which is being provided through various kinds of support mechanisms, and by the way, you have a lot of AI generated support by the government in form of bots, in terms of robo replies, which are helping us with the compliance of the 9 environment and the labor laws, in terms of web portal activity and mobile applications, for IPR, that is for patents, for copyright applications. Because at the end of the day, if I've come up with a new something, let's say I've come up with a new mobile application to help women during the time of their periods, so this period application needs to be registered or needs to get a patent or needs to have its unique identity. Now that is where a government really facilitates in intellectual property rights support. It really holds in exit process also. Let's say, I'm struggling to sustain my enterprise, so in that sense, for insolvency, lot of startups are not able to sustain after a point. There also government helps in winding up or closing down or shutting down the businesses which you are not able to sustain. It's funding incentives from the small and medium enterprises from SIDBI. SIDBI is the Small Industrial Development Bank of India. It keeps on providing funds for various investments in the startups. Initial corpus of about 2,500 crores can be provided, but that is for all kinds of entrepreneurship. For media entrepreneurships, the figure may not be as large as 2,500 crores, but there is a credit guarantee mechanism, and that is very reassuring in that country. So this is one of the biggest strengths in terms of what kind of support the government is providing, that we have a credit guarantee, and so we don't have to fight for the overheads all the time. we're not able to come out with positive revenue in this particular quarter, so we'll be able to neutralize it in the next quarter because we have the credit guarantee with us. A lot of tax exemptions. I've been talking about the liberal regime, that there are less entry barriers and the tax regimes have been relaxed. A lot of taxes have been neutralized. Data entry of taxes have been neutralized. So these exemptions have also, income tax exemptions for the corporate tax have been provided. So these incentives are also working wonders for people who really want to start their own enterprise. And I'm seeing a lot of people are getting into, starting either into startups or into consultancy firms. So whichever way, these are all entrepreneurial ventures. Incubation is something which all of us need to understand. And one such example of incubation is right up on the screen. What government has done, and which is really which is a heartening space for us, you and I as media educators, is this space of creating incubation cells, Atal incubation centers. Government has initiated this movement across universities in the country, wherein Atal incubation centers have been put up, and these encourage students in the postgraduate programs, in the doctoral programs, in the postdoctoral programs, or research associates who are working on various projects in centers of excellence in the universities, to come up and propose very easy ways of proposals, very easy way of writing the proposal, simplified version. And there is an annual seed grant which is provided. There is an establishing startup money which is provided to you. So lot of such innovative training is provided to you. So lot of such practices are now seen, so that everybody in that sense can try out for an enterprise. So skill development, innovation incubation, startup seed grants, how to write proposals, training and research, all of these have become fundamentals in terms of the government initiatives of support which is being provided towards media entrepreneurship and innovation in the country. And within that premise, would you find institutions innovation council, Ministry of Education, they've started a new initiative in which every institution will have an innovation council, and various activities are organized in these short-term training programs are also organized within these councils in order to equip them. I was talking about how various kinds of skills, new skills can be acquired. So reskilling and upskilling can happen through these innovation councils, and incubation and innovation can come together to create an enterprise. Some more initiatives, because I want you to understand and realize it's not always only about news. So these incentives are about, how the film industry is also being supported so that you can start your own enterprises, and the industry is encouraged. So while the FDI limit, everybody knows, has gone up to 100% in all media, in cable as well as DTH satellite platforms, what has the government done is that there is an industry status to film industry. When you get an industry status, then you can get various kinds of loans. You can get various kinds of benefits in terms of tax exemptions. You can get various kinds of exemptions for joint ventures. You can collaborate with other partners from various other countries as well. So you become an entity. You become a business, an enterprise in the truest sense of word. Besides that, you have a film facilitation office which has been set by the Ministry of I&B, which acts as a single window clearance, so that those delays which we've been dealing with, that the files don't move for ages, doesn't happen, and that the production companies, whatever production company or the unit you want to start, it gets its clearances within no time, and the requisite filming permissions are also given in time. You have the merger of film media units in order to improve the efficiency under so one umbrella is being created. And besides that, a very important continuum which was started in 2020 was this animation, visual effects, gaming and comic center. So realization of what lies ahead, that animation and gaming industry is perhaps the future of this country, wherein large section of people are involved in either game content creation or game consumption. So it becomes very important that you have a vertical, a center of excellence sort of a creation. Now this has been done again in collaboration with an education institution, and that is why these conversations in educational institutions are very, very important. We're quickly moving towards the last part of this particular talk, and that I think this talk should end with this particular case. when we are trying to exemplify what is a media entrepreneur enterprise. So NewsBite is one such case in point. It's a case study of media and entertainment enterprise, which was started in 2015 by Romesh Khadar. Now, Romesh started this particular enterprise. He wanted to uniquely position it as, an enterprise, an organization, a small organization which provides quality content based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. That he wanted to minimize use of human resources or human occupation, and he succeeded in doing so. Of course, initial team size for the longest time was small. He had set of 19 people and then 33, and then of course now the team size is 60. So for the longest time, from 2015 till 2020, he was not really into profit. He was breaking even. By 2020, Newsbite became profitable. And this has two kinds of models. One is the B2C model, that is content creators, people who create quality content for the consumers. Another is there's set of people, technology based people from e-commerce, from edutech, from media, who are also in the process of creating or helping create particular content for target audiences. Both these models come together, and this particular news entrepreneurship was trying to challenge the bigger ones like InShots. Right? It was in that sense, it was trying to capture its space in the market full of news aggregators like InShots and Google News. So, in that sense, and from 2020, if I look at the diversification and growth curve of News Bytes, what I can see is that after 2020, it has now gone into gaming. It has also gone into, it was the first one to try to maximize fantasy 11, that is fantasy sports. So it has diversified, it has branched out, it has created its brand extensions alongside, and not just line extensions in the news curve. So this is one such example which I wanted to put out for all of you to have a look at. And that brings us to the end of today's talk. So the takeaways or the concluding pointers of this conversation could be that it is about an idea, an innovation, and a process in a mediatized environment to create media offerings where you have to be very realistic about your business sources. What is your original funding? Where are you getting your original money from? Are you taking help from family? What is the kind of help that is being offered to you? Is there a government loan which is available to you? Then there are entrepreneurship sources in terms of human resource, in terms of talent, in terms of skill, in terms of competencies. And then what kind of technology industry? Are you getting into gaming, which requires a certain kind of technology, code based technology, require, or are you getting into writing, a publishing industry? The technology required is desktop publishing. So what kind of technology industry are you converging with? And what are the media ecosystems? We've talked about media ecologies and ecosystems in great detail. So these are the 4-pronged pointers which you need to keep in mind if if you're seriously trying to undertake or encourage your students to move towards media entrepreneurship. Leaving it at this at the moment. And if you have some questions, you can let me know.
That was wonderful and a very elaborative discussion, ma'am. Thank you so much for this brilliant deliberations on media innovation and entrepreneurship. It was cerebral feast for all of us. Now let us move on to the question and answer session. There are already some questions which are being dropped in the chat box. I'll read it for you, ma'am. Given a recent controversy related to Humans of Bombay versus People of India, what are the legal and ethical aspects media entrepreneurs should keep in mind while creating the content? This is the question from Professor Tamsha Ghosh.
Thank you so much for the question, Professor. Yes, of course. All of us at the moment are glued to the developments in the controversy of Humans of Bombay versus People of India. But when you're talking about a specific aspect of the legal and ethical aspects, entrepreneurs need to keep in mind, first thing is literacy. Literacy with regards to legal frameworks. Are we conversant with the new amendments of the Digital Media Regulation Act 2021? Have we checked out the IPR amendments, the Data Protection Act, as well as the amendments in the IT Act 2000? These are four. These are almost like, our bread and butter. In case we are into digital media entrepreneurship, key legal frameworks on copyright, on plagiarism, because that's the major issue in Humans of Bombay. Issues of cheating, issues of plagiarized content, right? So it is very important to be extremely conversant with intellectual property rights. That is why this, the government is providing a lot of consciousness, sensitization, and support in terms of it is very important that you are not here to take data without, identification. And for that matter, you're not even going to use content with identification if it is not yours. That is something which they've been identified as a wrongdoing in their particular case. So legal, ethically, yes, it's very, very important that if you've claimed that it's your model, that it's a new enterprise and it's not imitation innovation, because in this case, it's a clear case of imitation innovation. So if it is a new enterprise, you're a claimant of new enterprise, then you have to ensure that in your vision statement itself, when you put out your vision statement, you actually explain in about 30 words, how is this enterprise a novel idea? What is that big idea that you are encapsulating as an enterprise in this particular organizational space? Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
There is also a few more questions. Dr. Manjula K, she is asking a question. How effective is online communication and online team for business entrepreneurs?
For business entrepreneurs or for media entrepreneurs? Or for both?
For both.
All right. It's a very interesting question and a problematic one. While if you are talking about developing work-based competencies, I would prefer a blended mode for a business entrepreneur. If you are dealing with, trying to create competencies, you are an organization, you are a business entrepreneur. Let's say you are an edutech or an agri-tech, an agricultural startup, and you want to train farmers, you want to build farmer competencies in how to use e-marketplaces, electronic marketplaces in the country, right? How to put out where they get their seeds from, how to transact on online spaces in terms of tomato, mushrooms, whatever they grow, then it's a very good idea. Then online spaces for e-marketplace, for e-transaction, that's a very good idea. But let's say if you are a digital studio, if you're a digital photography studio, a media enterprise like such, and you want to create skilling, skilling is a very important part of resource structure in your integrative space. In that case, I would say both offline and online integration is required, and just online communication will not suffice.
Thank you, ma'am. There is a question from Dr. Sangeeta. Can you please shed light on scope of AI in media industry and how is it going to change the media entrepreneurship?
In fact, Sangeeta, the last, I think, case which I referred to of Newsbite was about how, Romesh was extremely determined that I am going to introduce both machine learning and artificial intelligence to create content, and that I am not going to use a lot of human resource, right? Human skills, and I'm going to use machine learning and AI to build these competencies and to build this enterprise. So yes and no, Sangeeta, what we are seeing at the moment is use of AI in programmatic advertising, right? In order to segment target markets. That is evident. What we are also seeing use of lot of artificial intelligence in trying to, duplicate the virtualization of a product. Like for instance, if you want to show customization of a particular space, screen, product, growth, then we are using a lot of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence can be an embedded space and can be an isolated space in media entrepreneurship. But what I do not see at the moment, because there are a lot of ethical challenges, use of generative AI creates a lot of ethical challenges in the country. Whose data is it? Like for instance, let me use an AI prompt to write a creative brief. I am an agency. I've started a new enterprise and advertising agency. And if I ask AI to write a creative brief prompt, now they are procuring data from everywhere. People, other agencies might also use the same AI prompt. So all of us will have a homogeneous creative brief. So there is whose creative brief is it? Ownership, control, plagiarism. There are major issues, and that is why we have to navigate those issues if we have to look at contributions of generative or assistive AI in media and entertainment industry from here onwards.
Ma'am, related to that, I have a question. Since we are more depending on AI technology and all technology-based system, don't you think human resource will go down? What will be the future about it?
Okay, there are two ways to answer this question. While there is no need to panic, one is, at the end of the day, people will recognize as the euphoria will settle down around AI. We are into the first semester of AI and everybody is too euphoric about ChatGPT. Once it settles down, people will understand that ChatGPT has its limitations. One of the biggest limitations is that it only collects data up to 2021. So they do not have the updated information, and the naked eye, people like you and me who are trained in this particular profession, will add that unique value. So that unique brand value or the unique brand voice, which generative AI or assistive AI is not able to create, is still our area. And I would look at all of them as assistants. I would use AI tools to assist me. Like for instance, I am to give a presentation on, to a client tomorrow and prepare a media brief or a creative brief. So the kind of resources which they are able to enlist and, analyze at short amount of time to give me those pointers. So the first draft, an AI is a very good tool to prepare the first draft. But once you have the first draft, then you get into preparing, making it complex, making it structured, making it interventionist. That is your job. We have to work together. So they are not taking away our jobs. It's a convergent environment. They are very limited. They have limited capacities, whereas human beings have unlimited, profound capabilities. So we work together in the media and entertainment industry.
True, ma'am, that's true. Dr. Sudeshna Das is asking a question. How significant is FDI in the context of the raids conducted recently on some media houses?
That's hitting nail on the head. Yeah, quite significant. But lots is coming out, Sudeshna. I'm just waiting and watching. Let's have this discussion 30 days from now. At the moment, a lot of things are happening. Yes, whenever there is a conversation of foreign direct investment, while you open up barriers and you increase the percentages to 100%, it looks extremely, it makes a great story. Nirmala Sitharaman coming and saying now it's 100% in media and everybody goes gung-ho about it. But the larger understandings of what does it entail, where is the funding coming from, right? What are the offshore units? Are those offshore units safe havens? Are those recognized, not recognized organizations? All of these are questions we need to grapple with. And yes, of course, there is a role which it will play. But as of now, to give you a definitive answer, because lots is being said, would be little premature. We can have this conversation 20 to 25 or 30 days, and then all of it will unfold. By that time, the dust will also settle.
Yes, ma'am. That's true.
Dr. Natarajan is asking how effective integrated media entrepreneurship is in curriculum and development entrepreneurship in education institution.
Now, this is a very interesting question, and all of us are grappling with it. At the moment, most of us are having discussions around it. One could be just launching a certificate course, right? And that course predominantly about skilling, about talking about funding, about talking about support mechanisms, about helping them incubate ideas. That is one way, right? But to have a full-fledged module, I think we have to think hard. What is the objective of a full-fledged module is something which we have to think hard. But there is a need, certainly, as electives. I would say, yeah, one idea could be, let's introduce an elective in media entrepreneurship. Another elective could be ownership and media economic systems. And this could be media entrepreneurship. People can choose one of them.
Thank you, ma'am, for that answer. Again, Sudeshna Das is asking, Anurag Kashyap in recent interview talks about challenging zamindari system in film industry. So how feasible is something like this Cantara factor in leading in box office today?
Not the way. See, it's not easy. Challenging the zamindari system in Hindi film industry is tough. They've had it for way too long. But we're seeing a lot of crowdsourcing, Sudeshna. A lot of crowdsourced films are also being created. And then, of course, the release platforms and the release modalities have also changed. There is a preference for OTT release as well. Let's not go in for theatrical release. If you're looking for a silver screen theatrical release, then I doubt whether Anurag's. I will not agree with Anurag's hope. But if you're looking for alternative release platforms, then it's quite doable. Crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, another way of looking at it. Small enterprise, we've talked about, in fact, Sudeshna, in one of my slides, I was talking about how film is the focus now. So you're creating film facilitation offices, trying to create, helping people to start off with small production houses, 1% production house. And let's say you are a trained filmmaker, you've just come out of FTII or any other media school and you want to start your own production house. Extremely facilitating environment is now being created so that your legal hassles are taken care of, your permissions, your censorship certification is also taken care of, your delays are minimized. So all of that takes place as and how we think so. Then, there are alternative spaces, and this zamindari cannot be, totally broken in next 10 years, but shaken. Absolutely.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, in terms of these incubation centers, you spoke about the setting up of incubation centers, even in our universities. For that matter, even Reva, for that matter, we have the concept of Reva Nest, which is an incubation center. But I see a lack of connect with departments like the media department between and the incubation cell in our university. So how do you think? I mean, even in terms of independent filmmaking, why can't we turn that into an idea which can be copyrighted and go to the next level and have some help from the incubation center? So how do we lead there? We can
You know
tell.
what, Sudeshna, what's happened is that most of these incubation centers are started with the help of technology departments, like the information technology departments are instrumental in setting up these incubation cells. And their understanding of a product or an entrepreneurship is coming out with an output like, there is a software they've made, or there's a hardware they've created, a tangible good. So their understanding of, we had proposed a game for change, game for social development. So it takes time for them to understand that this too is an intervention. This too is a product. So the larger issue is to make them understand that media offerings are different. That they can be film as an intervention, they can be a game as an intervention, they can be an application, a mobile application for menstrual communication as an intervention. So I think more engagement, more of us need to have these consultation meets. These spaces, we need to be, there has to be sisterhood. Media at the universities and departments need to have this sisterhood wherein we come together and make people understand that your tangible ideas are different from our tangible interventions, and these interventions are as entrepreneurial, as profitable in nature as perhaps what you have been doing.
Yes.
So they have this hackathon, every IT department
Yes,
as part
yes.
of it, they have this hackathon. We have our own kinds of marathons, which we have. We have photo marathons. We have, these development photo essay marathons. So we have our own ideas. Those spaces need to be communicated more effectively. The irony is that most of the authorities are full of people in information technology.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
That's very true, ma'am. And also, we should make our management understand our media arts and humanities, our media studies department is, it works in a different way. Thank you, ma'am, for that answer. There is one question from Professor Odile. Media entrepreneurs have to stay in business, and they have to also adhere to certain pressures, such as it may be political or other different types of pressure. What kind of pressures they should be weary of, and how to deal with them while also taking care of business?
That is why, there was in my conversation, I had referred to business models. Now, there are models in which they have to yield to pressures. Pressures, of course, are always going to be there, both from the corporates and from the politicians. Now, if you have a model which is advertising revenue driven model, then in that case you are likely to yield to the pressure because you have to survive and sustain. But if it's subscription driven model, you have to sensitize the population of this country that subscription driven model is prudent, leads to independent media. Once this particular premise is set, I think we'll be able to breathe easier.
Ma'am, related to that, I have a question. You mentioned about the revenue models. And also, what are the non-revenue models, ma'am? Can you give one example for it, non-revenue model?
Revenue generation is key to success of an enterprise. Non-revenue models could be wherein we make money, as in there is a subscription driven model or a crowd funded. Let's say I start a news website and then I expect people, I ask for, I go open to the country, I ask for funds, you contribute 200 rupees, he contributes 400 rupees, chanda ikattha karna, right? So I get funding from everywhere and I sustain myself every month. This is what I do in a cyclical manner, right? And non-revenue would mean that I'm not utilizing this revenue for profit maximization. Whatever money I'm creating, I'm sustaining the business as well as then using it to support, let's say, girl child education, to support women employees in my firm, right? So the greater common good. So I am not into the process of maximizing profit in order to create a bigger enterprise. I'm not into expansion and diversification. I'm into utilizing whatever money is being made through crowdsourcing, through crowdfunding, by putting it in for a social cause.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. And another question from my side. You spoke about intrapreneurship. So being educator, we are working for a college or something like that. How do we go ahead with this? Like, what kind of business we can think of being into education field?
Like, for instance, I was telling you about something I've been doing and planning to do is games. Trying to create digital games, let's say games on news literacy. Because in order to tell, if we become extremely preachy, if I have to tell a child of 12, of age 12 or 13, no, this is misinformation. Don't read this WhatsApp message. This is wrong. This is fake news. After a point, they find it extremely annoying and they're going to shut out their brain to me. It becomes very preachy. So what I can do is I can develop a game which is a lot of fun, a digital game, which is about news literacy, which talks about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, fake news, fake information, sources of news, verification, data check, fact check, in a manner in which you're playing a game. It's almost like a Ludo or a chess, right? Or a card game. So I create that particular game. Now this is, I'm still working. I'm a government employee. I'm working in this organization. I go to the Atal incubation cell. I put up my project. In that, I become an entrepreneur. There is a separate project I'm working on, which is translational in nature, that you've created. You've translated into an output. And that output, now that game can be patented. That patent, of course, in my case, would go to GGS IPO because it's entrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't own it. So that game would be, the ownership would be combined, collective, authorship would be mine, and that entrepreneurship would survive.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for this wonderful session. And you have covered almost every factor related to media innovation and entrepreneurship. I take this opportunity to thank you for this thoughtful session and patiently answering all the questions. The root of all goodness lie in the soil of appreciation. I convey my heartfelt thanks to everyone who have participated in this today's FTP session. Thank you all for making this session success. Feedback link is posted in the chat box. Kindly fill that. And please do remember to join tomorrow's FTP session. Thank you. Take care and have
दिव्या
a good
मैम,
evening.
हेलो, हमारी आवाज जा रही है? हेलो
हाँ, sir. Go ahead with
दिव्या मैम, मैं हिंदी लैंग्वेज में बोलूंगा और मैं पटना बिहार से जुड़ा था और मैं आज इस प्लेटफॉर्म पर मैं बता दूं कि मैम मैं पहली बार माइक्रोसॉफ्ट का प्रयोग किया, क्योंकि मैंने आज तक माइक्रोसॉफ्ट पर नहीं, गूगल मीट और जूम पर मैंने मैम से भी रिक्वेस्ट किया था कि मैं जुड़ूं। और सबसे बड़ी बात है, मैं आज तीसरा दिन, मैं 2 सेशन को मैंने छोड़ दिया। मुझे एक पछतावा ये भी है, मैं पटना बिहार से हूँ और मीडिया का पीजी से मैंने पत्रकारिता की पढ़ाई की। मैं अभी इंटर्नशिप कर रहा हूँ न्यूज़ 24 में और मैं कार्य करते हुए मैंने पत्रकारिता को एक पढ़ा। मगर एक बात बोलना चाहूंगा मैम, कुलबीन मैम, आपसे मेरी पहली बार मुलाकात हुई, क्योंकि पूरे कोरोना काल ने हम लोग को इतना अच्छा अवसर दिया। ये गूगल मीट, जूम, इतने माइक्रोसॉफ्ट, कई यूनिवर्सिटी ने कार्यक्रम करवाया और कई हमारे जैसे छात्र जो बैठे हुए थे घर पे बैठकर इसके लुत्फ उठा रहे थे, मतलब जानकारी लेने के लिए।